Hello and welcome to the book bag review of the Oxford Literary Festival 224. I just got back a few days ago. It's always completely knackering, I have to say. Over, I think, 8 days, I did 11 events, 12 events with 20 authors because there were quite a few panels to do. You may see that I have a towering pile of books here. These are some of the authors that I interviewed. It's actually trembling as I speak, so I'm risking what we call in the trade a Leonard Bast moment. If you know, you know. So I have here displayed last year's book bag. I'm afraid there wasn't a book bag this year. Behind the towering pile, there's a book bag from the year before. So come on, step up, sponsors. We need new book bags. So let's begin. I did manage to go to a few other events in between the ones that I was chairing. It was a completely fantastic festival. So big, so many beautiful venues, a host of authors, and very many topics. I mean, history, art, science, quite a lot of lectures about sustainability and vegan politics and so on. I mean, it's always a feast of ideas and competing ideas as well. Things are up for debate. People aren't cancelled. There are people invited who perhaps raise a few eyebrows elsewhere, but not at Oxford. It's a wonderful festival. So with the help of my trusty programme, my Bible throughout the festival, let's go through my highlights for everyone who couldn't be there in person. So I arrived early on Saturday, the 16th of March, which was great because it meant that I was able to catch an event with Cara Hunter, who has been on the book bag, the crime novelist Cara Hunter. She was on with Victoria Selman, another crime novelist, chaired by the amazing Triona Adams. It was a crime fiction day. I think Cara was doing 2 events, including her ever popular event with the crime scene specialists on whose expertise she relies to make her crime novels as authentic as possible. But I went to the first event and as well as giving an insight into their books and their working practices, the pair of them, Vicky and Cara, were very interesting about the ethics of basing stories on real life cases and, you know, the legality around that, where they get their ideas from, what they do with those ideas. So fascinating talk. I was very glad to drop into that. Also on Vaseem Khan, I bumped into him. I think he was at that event as well. Had a little chat with him, another crime writer. Also bumped into Pen Vogler, who I chatted to later on at dinner. She has written a wonderful, she writes on food, and her book is Stuffed: A History of Good Food and Hard Times in Britain, the Politics of Food. Fascinating author. I didn't get a chance to go to her talk, alas. So whizzing along, there was a wonderful dinner on Saturday night. A lot of the dinners were vegan, which was extremely interesting. That was a great innovation by festival director Sally Dunsmore. I guess part of making the festival very sustainable. We were based at Exeter College, and as ever, the chef and the team there did an amazing job. So my first event, and we're still on Saturday, was 2 debut novelists. I love reviewing debuts and meeting them. And so I'm going to very gingerly take something off the towering pile. It's like reverse Jenga. I may be buried under this at some stage. Let's hope not. So I was talking to Strang, author of Quinn, and Emma Hines, author of The Knowing, 2 debuts. And you know, whenever you have more than one author, sometimes it's very obvious how it's going to go, what the strands you're going to pull together are. And sometimes, as in, oh, you know, the common thread is that they're both debuts. It can be a little bit difficult to find the links, but you always do. And there was a very interesting link between these two books. Now, Quinn is a very intense, quite troubling first-person voice of a deeply disturbed man who has done something terrible, but has either blanked it out or just cannot bring himself to think about it. So someone is dead, and he's convinced they're still alive, and he is in prison. It's a novel of incarceration. It's very enclosed, very intense, and in complete contrast, in a way, The Knowing by Emma Hines is this story with many, many characters, many settings. It begins in New York. It's in the mid-19th century. It's about psychics, freak shows, people on the margins who are making their way in the world by hook or by crook, and sort of queer identities in, I want to call it the Victorian era, but it isn't really, of course, although they do then go to Manchester. The characters travel across the Atlantic. But there were threads to bring together. One, delightfully, was theology, because Emma has also written a book on theology. And talked a lot about Christian forgiveness. She has worked with men in prison, some of them sex offenders, very difficult, profound work of healing. And it's all in this book, which is just quite a slender book. Healing, what does redemption mean? What does forgiveness mean? And there is what she calls a radical act of forgiveness in the book. I think she really moved the audience talking about that. And Emma Hines' book, is sort of thrilling in a different way, gothic, full of extraordinary characters, as I say, making their way in the world in difficult circumstances, with a figure at the centre who is disabled, and just a profoundly interesting character. So that was in the Oxford Martin School, and the next day, so we're still on Saturday, the next day I hot-footed it along to see Paul Lynch in the Sheldonian, interviewed by Jake Carriage, my very good friend, and it was a fantastic event. Paul was a great speaker, great reader of his work. He was incredibly interesting about his reliance on the subconscious to kind of fix things for him, move the novel along when he gets stuck. He sort of goes into kind of dreams. I mean, at one point he talked very interestingly about getting a steer from a line of a Louis MacNeice poem, you know, feeling struck. It's more a sense of the tone. It didn't give him a plot idea or anything like that, but I mean, the beautiful sentences in MacNeice's poems just kind of jolted him along, and gave him a sentence that appeared in his Booker prize-winning novel, The Prophet Song. Fascinating talk. So I was really glad to have seen that. Whizzing through, I mean, there were so many interesting talks, but I couldn't get to all of them. Still Sunday, I interviewed three young novelists, and the theme there was they are in the limelight, in that they've won literary prizes. So a very interesting topic of conversation was what happens to your work if you win a literary prize quite early on? Does it embolden you, fill you with confidence, or fill you with terror? You know, I'll never be this good again. So the people I was talking to, actually, the very wonderful Derek Owusu, who is an ex-student of mine, So it's always wonderful to catch up with Derek. I mean, I can't take any credit for his brilliance. I was teaching him journalism, and he was, I think he'd already won the Desmond Elliot. So, like I say, I can't take credit, but it's always great to listen to him. He was very funny about readers' reactions on social media to his works, and kind of why you get tagged into something critical that you might not want to hear, and how you react to that. And writing in poetry, and we talked about how it's not autobiographical. It's not strictly autobiographical. As I said, no mothers were harmed during the writing of this novel. Great fun. And he was on with Caris Davis for this novel. Clear. Now, they're prize winners. They've been tremendously lauded for their work. Caris has actually written several collections of poetry and novels that have done extremely well. And this, again, is a slender novel about called Clear, which is a reference to the clearances in Scotland, and it's set on an island, a remote island, and a man is dispatched to tell the lone occupant of the island to clear off. Your life is over here, leave your animals. We'll sort of make it worth your while, but not really, but you're off. And I mean, a lot happens in a very slender novel. So it was wonderful to talk to Caris about that. And then when we get to the third one, Mr. Guy Gunaratney, and because of the way they were placed on the stage, I said, you're basically minimalist, and maximalist in the middle, because this is a vast, sprawling, burgeoning novel with Dickensian themes, in fact, and sort of little nods to Great Expectations. So we have two very lean, very focused narratives, and then a sort of big, bouncing narrative that kind of goes in all different directions and fizzes and sparks. So that led to some interesting discussions and indeed readings. Everybody had a kind of different method for writing, but I did manage to draw out another link between these very different novels, which is use of other languages, the dropping in of foreign words without necessarily explaining what they are. I mean, in Derek's book, it's Tree, I think he pronounced it, from Ghana. There's a mother in the book who bursts out with all these interesting phrases, and they're not. It can be clear from the context what it's about, but they're not translated word for word. Clear is actually about language in a very profound way, because the man on the island is one of the very last speakers of a dialect, a kind of Scandinavian Scottish dialect, and Caris Davis discovered this in archives in Scotland. She discovered a book somebody had written about this, noting down words. I mean, you've heard of 20 words for snow, or 50 words for snow, or however many there are. There are an awful lot of words for cloud formation, different textures of soil, different types of rain, and the look of the sea. Many of the dialect words that are used, because these two men, they have to sort of learn to understand each other in the book. And in Mr. there's quite a lot of Arabic. It's about radicalization. A poet, an inspirational poet from the East End of London, who is very influenced by Arabic poetry, who then becomes radicalized and heads off to join the caliphate. And Guy Gunaratney said, I just love Arabic poetry, and it was great to just put in as much as I could of my big obsession. Really fun, great to talk to them. On to Monday. I cleared off on Monday. I actually came Back, went to Sevenoaks to interview Andrei Kirkov on stage, and I'd actually seen him the day before in Oxford, so that was quite good fun. I did a different sort of event in Sevenoaks after seeing the one in Oxford. We focused more on the fact that he's writing mystery novels rather than that he's an author from Ukraine and everything that entails. Although, we had interesting conversations about what's happening with Ukrainian literature in the face of what's going on there at the moment. So I was back on Tuesday, back for the duration. Had a conversation in the extraordinary Divinity School with Amanda Craig. She's been on the book bag. She's an old pal. We had the most wonderful time chatting, but it's very strange in the Divinity School because we had the 6 to 7 o'clock slot, and they just said, well, there isn't really much lighting here. They'd put a kind of lamp on the pair of us, but the room just got darker and darker and darker, and at the end, from the stage, you couldn't see that there was any audience there at all. But Amanda is always super entertaining, talking about her work, The Three Graces. She'd given me a list. I think she tweeted, we shall be talking about. So I just followed her lead. We talked about Ian Forster, the migration crisis in Italy, what it's like to actually live in an Italian idyll. Spoiler alert, it's not always idyllic. We talked about her wonderful characters and the three ladies at the centre of the novel who are kind of late 80s, and why she feels it's important to have these voices, to centre the voices. At one point she said, I just love old people, and if I can see there's an old person in the corner of some party or gathering and everybody else is not going near them, and she said, I'll go and sit down and just have the most amazing conversation and hear the most amazing stories. So always a pleasure to talk to Amanda, even in growing darkness where we can barely see each other. On to Wednesday. Oh, yes. Actually, I should just look at my pile. That will remind me. So 2 more authors, very different, great fun together. These 2 books. Oh, am I doing? No, I'm doing that wrong. Bridge by Lauren Bucas and The Garnet Girls by Georgina Moore. I mean, again, on the face of it, incredibly different narrative styles, different genres, different novels, but we had a blast because they were both such great speakers, both so interesting. Georgina is very well known in publishing as a kind of uber publicist of whom we're all completely terrified. So she was very entertaining about what it's like to move over. I mean, I can never quite work out the gamekeeper turned poacher idea. I don't know which is which, but whichever it is, she's moved over to the other side, and had some entertaining stories about that. So her book is set on the Isle of Wight. It's centered around 3 sisters. They're different positions in the family, the different expectations that are placed on them, and the men or not men that they get involved with. I don't want to give anything away. And to go back to the idea of an older character, I mean, not as old as Amanda's, but the mother of the 3 girls is a very interesting character. She is not, she's not ready to give up, certainly on love, sex, and excitement. So it's set in the Isle of Wight. It's well, I'll move on to Lauren's book, actually. So again, totally different. This one is set in America. There is a non-binary character in it, so it was very interesting to talk to Lauren about how she created that character and how the character functioned in the plot and kind of functioned in her mind while she was reading it. And that led us on to authenticity readers and being careful not to cause offence, and whether sometimes you you might need to cause, not offence, but, you know, write about difficult things. I mean, writing isn't a comfort blanket. You know, novels aren't there necessarily to tell you how great everything is. So we had interesting conversations about that. It was very hard to talk in plot terms about Lauren's book, but I think it's one thing I could bring out. And I was sort of going, well, both your characters travel, don't they? Both your novels have settings, don't they? It was quite funny. But mothers and daughters was a theme in both novels, and the character in Bridge, who is called Bridge, and she is a bridge, has a her mother has recently died. Her mother was a scientist involved in quite strange experiments. And one of the key things she was experimenting on was a weird kind of hallucinogenic drug. And what it does to you, it seems to be able to allow you to time travel, and it seems to allow you to be able to inhabit different identities that are still you. I mean, yeah, I mean, really, after about 50 pages, you can't talk about the plot anymore without there being massive spoilers. So we were having a little bit of a laugh about that. But yes, mothers and daughters was another theme that we came across. That night, or I didn't go to this event. Actually, it was the following night, but I met a wonderful chap called Gary Francione, Professor Gary Francione. And when we met, he mentioned Shelley in the first couple of minutes, and I think we both recognised the glint of fanaticism in each other's eyes. So we had wonderful conversations where I think we were both sounding each other out. It's like, oh, he's read that obscure pamphlet. Oh, he does know the don'ts. Oh, that's his theory about that particular ellipsis. I mean, we just had great fun. And it just underlines that festivals aren't just about going to an event and buying a book afterwards and getting it signed. I mean, there were just writers milling around all over Oxford, people that you could just stop in the street and chat to. And there's obviously lots of lovely green room chats. So it was a delight to meet Gary, and I think we'll probably meet up again to talk about our shared obsession and maybe even collaborate on something. Who knows? Right. Okay, so we're still on the same day. We're still on Wednesday, and I had 2 historical novels. We were back in the Divinity School, but this time it really worked. The fact that it just got darker and darker and darker and darker and darker, because we were talking about Victorian seances. 2 novels that actually fit together really well. It was Liz Hayder and Lucy Barker. I've got Liz's book, The Illusions. I'm afraid I dumped all my proof copies in Oxford because, I mean, I just had all these books to bring back. So I don't have Lucy's book, The Other Side of Mrs. Wood, but that's about 2 warring mediums in Victorian London. And Liz's book is it's an interesting confluence of seances. They both write about seances and how the tricks were performed, but also it kind of shades off into magic, because the people running seances were more or less like magicians, really, using many of the same tricks to achieve their effects. And then the other thing Liz realised she could bring into the mix was very early cinema, and the potential there for adding to the effects of seances, and indeed helping magicians. I mean, there are some great magician characters in The Illusions. She's done an enormous amount of research into the period, and there's if I can find this, there is so this is set right at the end of the Victorian era, and there is a note here about the real life counterparts of my fictional characters. Renowned British magician David Devant. Motto: all done by kindness, which is used in the book. So two very well matched books, two very well matched authors who riffed off each other endlessly. It was a bit difficult to get Liz off the topic of Victorian bicycles. She's very keen on early bicycling history as she is on early film history. And at one point I had to say, we have to drop the bicycles. We have to go back to talking about seances and magic. Brilliant event. They were both such good fun. Somebody came up afterwards and said, "Oh, that was great. Wasn't that atmospheric in that amazing room?" The Divinity School is ancient, beautiful, remarkable, and wonderful. And in terms of just brushing past people, we literally passed in the quad. Rachel Cockerell's Melting Point. She was off to an event. I was off to something else. This is on Thursday, but she is going to come on the book bag. So we will be talking about her book, Melting Point, which is just getting rave reviews at the moment. I was actually off to talk to students at the Oxford Academy all day, and well, not all day, all afternoon. Wonderful students. Gave them a talk about writing tips, my writing tips. And then in the evening, there was an event with Patterson Joseph where he was interviewed by two of the students, and then we all mixed and mingled. Really good fun. So well done, Oxford Academy. You did us proud. I had to rush back. I had to sort of rush back from the Oxford Academy to do an event with Tony Sewell, Lord Sewell, and Tomiwa, let me get this right, Tomiwa Owolade, author of This Is Not America. I'd actually met Tom, at a party and thought he was fascinating and recommended him to the festival. So this was a talk about the Black British experience as opposed to the American Black experience, and how ideas are brought over from the other side of the Atlantic, and certainly, well, both Tom and Tony were saying some of these ideas do not suit the Black British experience. Some of them are not sufficiently nuanced to sum up experiences of Black people here and our particular history. So it's a fascinating debate. One of the things Tony talked about was Mary Seacole, not a nurse. I mean, his idea, and it's espoused in his book. His book is called Black Success. I didn't have a copy. I borrowed a copy for that event, but it's a fantastic book. It has Tony's life story. He's in the House of Lords. He's been an educator all his life. And he was very forthright about myth busting. I mean, one of the delightful myths he busts is the Windrush. They all came over to help the mother country. So he's not having any of that. He's very entertaining and very, very keen to be aspirational. His book is called Black Success because he has many stories of people who have absolutely thrived, and it's not an against the odds or terrible obstacles put in the way. It's realistic but also optimistic and hopeful, and a great read. And Tom's book, This Is Not America, again, really drills down into some of the ideas, a current sort of critical race theory, for example, he unpicks. He's a very clear thinker. It's a very interesting, thought-provoking polemic. I began actually by saying it was the sort of how did you come to write this book kind of question, and I said, was the George Floyd murder the starting point? And Tony immediately said no. But Tom kind of agreed with that. I mean, he was looking at the whole Black Lives Matter movement and saying, how applicable is all of the. I mean, in some ways it is applicable, and in some ways it isn't. He's a great unpicker, is Tom. So to me, what Owolade, really recommend it. It's a fascinating read. They're both great reads just about Britishness. So then I went to the Patterson Joseph event, and the next morning, Friday, yes, I was doing a lot of work searching for Juliet with the lovely Sophie Duncan. She's done at Magdalen College, and she's a sort of Shakespeare baby. She was born and brought up in Stratford-on-Avon, and her parents actually met working in the Shakespeare industry at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, I think she said, and she's worked at the Birthplace Trust herself. So it's probably inevitable that she is a Shakespeare obsessive. Lovely event. I mean, she just knows everything, not just about Romeo and Juliet and the rest of the plays and how everything was written and how everything was produced and who the actors were and all of that good stuff, but also the very long afterlife of Romeo and Juliet, specifically Juliet. Romeo is almost pejorative. She points out, oh, you're such a Romeo. Oh, hark at Romeo kind of thing. But Juliet is quite a powerful figure, and she traces that powerful figure through many productions, many actresses who've played the role. A little sideline into the American lesbian actress Charlotte Cushman, who played Romeo, and everybody loved her Romeo. And apparently she could get away with a bit more. Bizarrely, here's the paradox, the Shakespearean paradox. She could get away with a bit more pouring and lovey-dovey than a man could at the time. Again, this sort of 19th century, it was seen as much more acceptable for the love scene between women, as long as one of them is pretending to be a man. So yeah, super book. Really interesting talk. Sophie was amazing. I realise I'm just making another even more perilous pile on this side, so I'll start putting them down on the floor. Oh, I love this book. This is such a great, funny, hilarious, thought-provoking novel. I was asked to do it quite late. Could you please speak to this American novelist Nathan Hill. His previous novel was The Knicks. It got huge acclaim. I think that came out something like 2015. So this is the follow-up, and I said, oh yeah, no problem. I'll just go and buy it and I'll read it. It's 600 plus pages long, but the second I started it just grabs you right from the beginning. Bit of a Romeo and Juliet thing there as well. It's two lovers. Well, they don't know that they're going to be lovers. They're pining for each other, all unknowing, because their rooms are opposite each other across an alleyway. So he's kind of peeking at her, but what he doesn't know is she's peeking at him. They eventually meet. They have a long marriage. And the story of the novel is really about how you keep the excitement, how you navigate all the pitfalls of life, how you bring up a child. It's very much about the modern world, as you can tell from the title, wellness. There's a lot in it about this placebo effect. There are nutty characters who are trying to optimize every moment of their lives. The very rational woman, Elizabeth, at the heart of it, is working in a placebo studies centre. But of course, when it comes to her own child, she's actually quite gullible and kind of anxious about bringing him up in the optimal way. So much about how we live now, how we think, how we can get carried away by kind of internet memes and thoughts and the hive mind and the group mind and all that stuff. It's just brilliant. It's a brilliant novel. He was utterly charming. Can't recommend him highly enough. We're nearly there, but you can imagine what it was like for me for 8 days. So sometimes the events they don't pan out quite the way you'd planned, and the way they pan out is better than how you could ever have planned. So I was placed with two Ghanaian authors, and both their books are really, the novels are fascinating. Really, there's lots of things we could pull out to talk about. Azuka Ni Aikwe Parks. Sorry about that. People get my surname wrong the whole time. Ni Aikwe Parks. Azuka. And Night Bloom by Peace Adjo Medier. And what we could pull out, I mean, again, they're very different. Ni is a poet and an educator. He runs lots of events himself. His approach to writing is I think it's his first novel. It is dense and poetic and musical. Junior, the central character, there's a love story, more Romeo and Juliet. There is a love story at the heart of it. Junior is a musician, so the book has a kind of rich melodic quality to it. And also, I mean, there's an undertow of kind of the food industry, something that Nee is very interested in. He's very interested in food production and has studied it in detail. So it's a fictional island, and he just sort of brings it to life in the most extraordinary way, so that you can smell and almost taste the fruit, the blossoms, the food that's being cooked up. And Junior is from Ghana and has moved to this island and is very keen to be seen as just like everybody else. The story about belonging. Night Bloom has two cousins. It's structured. It was very interesting to talk to Peace about the way it was structured, because what she's done, she's presented this family story of this very intertwined Ghanaian family, very argumentative, always bitching about each other. She tells the story from one girl, and you really get invested in this story, and like the other people on the other side are horrible, and why do they behave in this weird way, and why don't they get it? And then the other half of the story is the other cousin, the other character, seeing it from their point of view. It's a brilliant structure, very cleverly done, and a really great read. A couple of the things that came out of that, one is the sort of the strictness of Ghanaian parentage. There's a little bit of this in Derek Owusu as well. The firm control that parents, especially mothers, like to have over their children and their children's activities. And schooling. At one point, the character goes to a very, very, very strict boarding school, which is based on a real boarding school in Ghana. And, they're up at dawn, running around, doing chores, 7 hours of learning. I mean, it's just quite extraordinary. So both Nee and Peace were talking about their experiences in the educational system in Ghana. It's very funny and very entertaining. But the most entertaining bit was when I asked Peace, like, well, the Ghanaian men in your book, they're so awful. Why are they so awful? I have to say, Nee took the discussion on Ghanaian men in very good heart and good spirit. They were brilliant readers of their work, incredibly funny, just great. So here they are again. I wasn't expecting the event to go quite the way it went, but we had an absolute blast. Those are the books. People Tree for Azuka and One World for Night Bloom. Terrific. Oh, no, I'm putting them on the floor so that I don't have a Leonard Bast moment. There we go. The amazing Bryony Gordon. Unfortunately, Bryony, so her book Mad Woman, follow-up to Mad Girl. I read and enjoyed both of them a great deal. She's obviously a columnist, kind of agony aunt, great audience. People really connect with Bryony because she's insanely honest. I mean, I said to her right at the beginning, I don't really know you, Bryony, but I feel like I know lots of very intimate things about you. So she's very frank and fearless. And unfortunately, she turned up with a broken leg, so she had this kind of boot on. She had crutches, and it was quite funny because one of the things she talks about is how brilliant running is. And unfortunately, because of this stress fracture she has, I mean, we had to sort of take her up and down in goods lifts to get to the stage at the Mathematical Institute. But she's very unfortunately had to not go on some planned marathons. I mean, she's a marathon runner. I can't tell you how in awe of this woman I am. But she's very nice. I said, all I've done is a half marathon. And she went, well, there you go. Don't put yourself down. All I've done is a half marathon. So, you know, her positivity message is pat yourself on the back for your achievements. You know, don't be looking elsewhere for validation and verification. So yeah, hilarious event. I think maybe I got 3 questions in, but we were roaring with laughter on stage, and she is, as ever, just so blisteringly honest and just such a tonic to be around. Before that, I think, yeah, I dropped into Peter Kemp's talk. Peter Kemp has written a book of his 50 years of literary criticism called Retroland. I'd love to talk to him in the book bag about it. Maybe I could rope him in. And he was just brilliant about trends. I mean, he's such a fierce critic. So there was a bit of a takedown of Salman Rushdie and a bit of a takedown of Hilary Mantel. I mean, he's fearless. He really is fearless. He didn't get stoned out of the Pusey Chapel because he's very open to other views, but he's very happy to tell you what his view is. And Toby Lichtig, the interviewer, asked him about autofiction, and he came out with a great line, which is possibly in the book: more auto than fiction, which I loved. I actually used that with Nathan. I think, did I use it with Nathan? I can't have done. No, I did use it with Nathan. No, I did. So Peter was on Friday, Nathan was on Saturday. We're getting near the end. I promise we're getting near the end. So I had this lovely event that I was really looking forward to called Queering the Historical Novel. Very sadly, one of the novelists could not make it, was ill, Lex Croucher. But Trouble is this kind of rework of Jane Austen, but with lots and lots of sass and cheek and humour. And I was dying to ask Lex about it. But unfortunately, yeah, Lex was a no-show. So we did talk about the book because we were all very sorry that they weren't there. I'll pop that on the pile. But we had the very entertaining C.A. Castle, the Manor House governess, and C.A. Charlie talked about the inspiration of the Brontes and Austen, but mostly growing up in Malta. Charlie used to watch adaptations. So it began with adaptations, and he's done academic work on literary adaptations and how they kind of change over time. So, but then obviously got into the fiction. So Manor House Governess is an homage to Jane Eyre, specifically Jane Eyre, which is a big obsession. And I rather cheekily said, I would call it Pride and Prejudice with pronouns. And this met with approval. I'm very glad to say. I mean, it's alliterative. We love alliteration. And that's actually not a historical novel. It borrows on historical tropes, but it's set in the present day in Cambridge, and I just loved it. Fantastic book. Down on the pile. And then KJ Charles, right, these are historical novels. And they're not, I mean, I didn't take them as based on any particular genre. I mean, possibly something like Daphne du Maurier and the Jamaica Inn kind of novel, but these are sexy romps with sexy gentlemen on Romney Marsh. You know, a lot of smuggling activity going on. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of how you research, how you discover about buried, hidden queer lives. Again, the use of authenticity readers, and in the case of C.A. Castler, it was very odd to get an authenticity read about your own lived experience to say that it was in some way incorrect. So very, very interesting debate there. They're just sort of great romps. The other thing that KJ Charles was very keen to talk about was, why is the romance genre kind of so disrespected when it is so popular? Romance novels sort of prop up the publication of literary novels, which sell far fewer copies. Very, very keen to stand up for romance. KJ Charles did work at Mills and Boon, and again, we ended up having a really interesting conversation about publishing. Both of them have worked or currently work in publishing, and how that influences what you think about your writing. Inevitably, you think about it more of a job and a service than, I must wait for my inspiration to strike. So I guess this again was an event that I wasn't expecting to be as much fun as it was. Great audience, and the nice thing at the end, when I said please thank the authors, somebody kind of did a yay, a whoop of delight, which you don't often get. Now, my very last author, you'd probably be relieved to hear by now. I'm not going to say saving the best till last. It's very disrespectful to everybody else. Everyone was great. But wow, Greg Doran. Greg Doran on My Shakespeare, a director's journey through the First Folio. He has directed every play in the First Folio, 400th anniversary of last year, as I'm sure you all know. Watch my interview with Chris Lautaris if you don't. He was fantastic on the topic. So it's not the case that Greg just happened to direct all the plays in the First Folio. His partner Tony Sher kind of tipped him off and said, you do realise what, if you just put a bit of effort in, you could do all of the plays in the First Folio. So Greg had a kind of bingo card. And his book is truly wonderful. I haven't got it because it might have been eaten by my house. And if you could see my house, you might understand what that means. It's under another towering pile somewhere. But it's full of great stories. There's so many things. It's part of it is an actor's life, going through from being a young actor, young kind of jobbing actor. Hope you don't mind me saying that, Greg, to becoming a director, and then of course artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company, a position from which he's only just stepped down. I saw many of his productions, loved them. And so the book is, as I say, it's part his memoir, it's part a memoir of working with the great Tony Sher on some of those huge roles, what it's like to work with extraordinary actors. Harriet Walter is another one. Judi Dench is another one. He's great anecdotes about Judi Dench in the rehearsal room. It's very much about textual scholarship, really drilling down into the speeches and the exercises he does with actors, and what of themselves he brings out for the role. I think we were in the green room when we talked about Arthur Hughes, who was his Richard III last year. Brilliant actor. I was very fortunate to meet Arthur on Monday at the Critics Circle Awards. He won an award last year and he presented an award this year. So, I mean, the book is just you can read it as a guide to the plays. If you were going to see King Lear or something like that, you could, just read that chapter and get amazing insights into, everything really: setting, costumes, props, and all those tricky lines that, the cruxes and the teasing out the meaning, and also what you need to cut. He says he cuts a lot of Shakespearean jokes. They're just not funny anymore. Cod pieces, no. He says he cuts the cod pieces out. The codpiece jokes, I should say. The things that kind of don't work, the things that do work. There was a delightful anecdote that he related, and it's in the book also, about when he was a young actor playing. He loves panto, and I think the playfulness of that really comes out in his productions. So he loves panto, and he once played, I think it's Corky the Chicken or something, but unfortunately he injured himself and found himself in A&E, still in his chicken costume, and of course nobody in A&E batted an eyelid. They probably thought they were hallucinating. There's a giant chicken sitting in the corner. So what an amazing end to talk to Greg. We could have filled a bigger venue. People were queuing to get in and begging for the last available chairs. There was a rather loud busker playing outside, so we had to do some closing of windows and dropping of blinds. But one thing I said at the beginning to Greg was, "There's a bum on every seat. Does that not gladden your heart?" So he was absolutely fantastic. That event was from 4 to 5 p.m. By 5:30 p.m. I was on the London train. I was heading back to Paddington with my huge stack of books and lovely memories, some great contacts, and I hope to be bringing a few of those authors onto the book bag over the following months. Thank you very much for listening to me waffle on. If you've made it this far, carry on checking out the book bag, and I'll bring some wonderful authors to you very, very soon. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.